Our guest this week is Petra Bergman. Petra is an associate in the Vorys Cincinnati office and a member of the litigation group. She has a broad, complex commercial litigation practice representing large corporations, small businesses, and individuals in both state and federal courts. Petra is a more recent graduate than many of our guests have been, and she had great insights on finding fulfillment where she would have least expected it when she started law school. As an old complex litigation associate myself, it was fun to compare with a much younger complex litigation associate how the staggering changes in technology have fundamentally altered the practice of law over the last 30 years. Hope you enjoy listening to the episode. It's one of my favorites. Thanks. Welcome to the podcast, Petra. You're laughing because we've been talking for 10 minutes, but I forgot to hit record properly, so we're going to do this over.
Okay,
so...
Thank you for having me. I get a second shot to be more polished.
Well, you know some of the questions that are coming as well. Okay, so you graduated from UC Law School in 2018, I think?
Yes.
Okay, and what are you doing now?
I am a commercial defense attorney in litigation at Vorys in Cincinnati.
Okay, and why did you go to law school?
I went to law school because I was one of those kids that always grew up just saying, like, I want to be a lawyer. Again, like, I don't know if it was like, I mean, liar is not a good example, but I feel like there was a lot of portrayal back in the 90s when I was growing up of like attorney, you know, like Ally McBeal and just a lot of lawyers on TV. And I was one of those kids that was just kind of passionate and sometimes bossy and kind of, you know, argumentative. And so I don't know where it came from because I have no attorneys in my family. I didn't know any attorneys, but I just always like, I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to be a lawyer. And so that had always been the goal. And I just slowly worked my way towards it.
Okay.
Fascinating. Were there any particular fields that you were interested in when you entered law school?
Yeah. So I think that is always an interesting question with the benefit of hindsight. And so I in my first year at law school, I was very envious of the kids that clearly had lawyers in their families because they like knew they had this level of understanding of what they were actually getting into that I just didn't. And so when I applied to law school, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to be a public defender. I wanted to practice law in a way that would meld with my values and, you know, make the world better. So I wanted to, you know, go into human rights law or, like I said, be a public defender or any number of things that I had no idea what it actually meant.
Mm. And were there any particular pivot points while you were in law school that changed your mind or experiences?
I was really fortunate to intern at one of the UN tribunals in The Hague. And that's offered through UC's Urban Morgan Institute for Human Rights. And I had a lovely time doing that. But it exposed me to, along with other things in the world and just kind of growing up and becoming more of an adult at the time, of things aren't always necessarily what they seem. And so I started to not become cynical, but realize that the world, there's a way that the world works, and it's not a bad thing, but often it's, you know, run by politics and, you know, matters of influence. And that was kind of like having the realization, like, Santa doesn't exist, you know, like you go to law school and you're like, I'm going to change the world. And like, if I do my best, I can do this, and it's going to matter. And that people spend a lot of their lives and they're so admirable doing that. But I realized very quickly that the ups and downs of that field would be too personal for me, where it would weigh on my soul in a way that would like crush me. So like I would do it with all the fervor in the world and be so passionate and would love doing it. Like I truly would love doing that work, but I would burn so bright for probably 5 to 10 years before it ate me alive. And so I was realizing all these things at the same time about myself because I had been volunteering at the animal shelter, realizing I was too sensitive and like getting upset about the dogs there. And then, seeing how politics kind of are part of everyday world. It's any job, certainly. Any corporation, even the, nonprofit corporations have politics and I had just, I think, naively thought that it wasn't the case. So all these things happened at the same time that I did rather well in law school and had somebody at the Career for Professional Development Center tell me, like, you need to apply to big law. And I was like, that's not for me. Like, I don't want to do that. But I had been just like flailing at the end of my first year. Like, I don't even know what the world is anymore. Like, what am I doing? And so I applied and had a very interesting conversation with a 3L at that time because she was on all these groups that I was a part of at the law school and in areas I cared about. And I just said, like, what are you doing after your third year when you graduate? And she said, I'm going to work for Frost. And I said, why? Like, why? Why? Like, I would have thought you would have gone to the ACLU, like anything. And she said, first, I have student loans. But second, you are underappreciating how much you can benefit the causes you care about without sacrificing like who you are. And she said, you have access to money as a big law attorney and you have access to people of influence and you can leverage that in a way that still changes the world for the better. And so that radically changed my outlook on how you can do good in this world.
Did you pick UC in part because of the Urban Morgan Human Rights Institute? And you were a fellow when you joined the school, right?
I was not a fellow. I was one of the kids that, young professionals that did like the editing. You could not, it's like not volunteer, but I wasn't one of the few people selected to be a fellow. Like that's a special area. I did not apply for that, but I was somebody who worked
involved in the Human Rights Quarterly.
Yeah. Okay. And kind of
site checking.
Right. All that. And assisting with that. And that allowed me to apply for a handful of the opportunities that they offer. And they offer a wide array. You can go to Botswana, you can go to they had connections, multiple connections in The Hague at the time. They were doing something, I think, in Spain and Colombia, something like it was. And to me, I was like, this is so attractive. I get to work for my summer. I get to do it in an area of law and I get to travel. And so like, to me, it was a no brainer. Because I love traveling and I was worried that, like once you get to whatever job you have, like that goes out the window,
right.
Which is not panned out because I'm actually leaving for a trip to Egypt in a few weeks.
Oh.
But I did not apply because of that. It was truly a function of where my family was at the time.
And I think you had some time in between undergrad and law school. What did you do in the interim?
So I graduated undergrad in 2010 and then moved to Lexington, Kentucky, someplace I thought I would never live, and is actually what showed me the beauty of Kentucky, because that's not, you think from Cincinnati, you're like, Northern Kentucky is Kentucky, and it's like nothing. Like there is so much beauty and culture to Kentucky that gets hidden from like, not heritage to say, but like horse farms are beautiful and like the bourbon industry and just like there are things of Kentucky I never saw. So I'm grateful for that opportunity. Met some of my best friends in the world, but I strictly moved there to support my spouse through the rest of her undergrad. So I could go to law school. So like this was just a pit stop. And I was like, you need to, because at the time she was interning at the federal courts and doing part-time school. And so I said, like, you need to quit that job. You need to go back to school full time and get out of school as quickly as possible so that I can go to law school. And so that was the 4-year pit stop in Lexington, during which I studied for the LSAT, took it, started applications, and kind of just twiddled my thumbs as a bank teller.
How do you think that having a 9-to-5 or 10 to 6 or whatever it was job impacted law school? Did it?
Yeah, this is going to be controversial because at least when I was here, the vast majority, I think it was like 80, 85% of the students were fresh out of undergrad. Like they were 22.
Yeah. I'd say it's 90% by now.
And as a 22-year-old, there I would have had no business in law school. Like I was like still having fun, like running around, just, trying to be a 22-year-old. And so interestingly, the people that did the best, for the most part, not everybody, we had some people that were 22 and did rather well, but overwhelmingly the people that were the non-traditional students of sorts did the best in law school.
How interesting.
Like
it's the way it was when I was there too. I mean, I sold windows and doors for a couple of years. So it's not like, what I did selling windows and doors did not prepare me for law school other than I got up in the morning, I went to work, I worked all day, and coming to law school where the work is so much more than what you had to do in undergrad didn't really have the same impact on me as it would have if I'd tried to do it straight out of undergrad. I would have been like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. Yeah. And instead I was like, oh, it's a job. It's like a job. It's an intense job, but it's a lot more fun than selling windows and doors. I assume you found it much more interesting than being a bank teller.
Yeah. Although I took up a weird collection of like strange money because the money that you come across in the bank. So like it became like an interesting thing for me where I'm like, geez, look at this cool thing. But no, I find interest in most things, like hence being just a passionate person. So I can run hot for like any topic, including rare or strange coins. But it's interesting that you say that. It's a double-edged sword now with hindsight. So I treated it like a job. I was more mature. I don't think your prefrontal cortex fully develops until you're 25. Right. So like,
it doesn't.
Yeah. And so like, I think you're just at a disadvantage because you're like fresh out of undergrad. You're probably tired because you just got yourself your first, tertiary degree. And then you launch right into law school, including while like studying for the LSATs, I think during your senior year,
yes.
Going straight through. Yeah. And so like, you're just not getting a break. So that's hard in and of itself. Treating it like a job though, which is what I did and how I did well. I think I not missed out, but there is a massive part of being a lawyer, or at least being a big law attorney, that is connections. And if you do treat it like a job and you aren't, going to some of those social events, or you're not kind of, I don't want to say partying, that's not the right word, but like, they were here for more. So they were not kids, but they were 22-year-olds and they wanted a social atmosphere and they were treating it as both school and a social atmosphere. And I didn't lean too much into that social atmosphere aspect. And I think in hindsight, I could have done a better job of that because I think right now I'm the last standing big law attorney from my graduating class.
Really? Amazing.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does cope both ways. I mean, I used to show up at Freeze or Woody's at 11 when all my friends had already been there for a few hours.
Right.
And so, you're at a different level of inebriation than everyone else
for ability to withstand it,
So you then, when you graduated, you went into Vorys, and you've talked about your reason for doing that. Why did you pick litigation, or did litigation pick you?
So back to that whole thing about like I can find interest in anything. I got to, and I didn't have the benefit of an attorney in my family. Like I said, I think there's these kids that have attorneys in their family and they just know. They have this like innate knowledge of like what it's like to be an attorney and like, going to certain events and going to certain places and, think like social clubs I'd never even heard of in my life before landing at Vorys, sorry, I just like lost my train of thought. What was the question again? I apologize. Repeat that.
Why'd you pick litigation? Or did litigation pick?
Yes. Okay. I can rephrase that. So I landed at Vorys and I was interested in everything. And I Vorys does a really good job, and I think a lot of the law firms do, of cycling you around. So like they make sure to meet you with each of the different groups. They try and elicit enough projects from each of the groups so that you get a good smattering of experience across your summer. And with the hopes that at the end of your summer, which I'm not sure you could ever really know at the end of a summer because you don't really know what you're doing until you get into it. But
Certainly.
you get to the end of your summer with hopes that you can say, like, I want to be in this group. And I know the law firms in town do it differently. But I got to the end of my summer and I was waffling so hard. I was like, this is interesting and this is interesting. And this is like, I was so interested in everything and didn't really know much about like what it would look like in practice. So like the topic is interesting, could love it. But then like, what does that look like on a day to day? So I had a handful of conversations with different people at the firm, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what to pick. And one of my current and still, best mentors was like, Petra, if you really can't pick the people. Like, because at the end of the day, if you're really truly torn, at least you'll know that you can work with these people. Like you like them. And to me, a big part of my day to day is like, there are some people that treat it like a job where not anybody particularly at Vorys, but like generally in the world, there are people that treat their jobs as 9 to 5s. They clock in, clock out. Mm-hmm. They don't kind of reach for that human connection. That's not me. So like I make work friends. And I was like, okay, that's actually a good point. Like I could love my job, but if I don't like my coworkers, I'm not going to love my job. But I may not like what I'm doing, but if I love my coworkers, I can be happy doing it. And so that resonated with me. And so we have a large litigation group. The people that had poured into me that summer were from the litigation group. Law school gears you towards litigation because you're reading cases, you're analyzing them, you're applying the facts. So like everything had kind of set me up to pick litigation, but ultimately I did. And now with the benefit of the hindsight, I am 100% a litigator through and through.
What do you think makes you 100% a litigator through and through?
Because I'm so curious. Like I, at least from where I'm at now. And so your job will change over time. So like what you do as an associate will change from what you do as a senior associate, from change what you do from a junior partner to a senior partner, ultimately to like the most senior partner. And I was built and I'm, learning the different skills, but because I'm a curious person, that means that I'm digging through documents like voraciously. I'm looking for that one case that'll make or break the brief. I'm just like digging and kind of just really getting into the facts and getting into the law, and that's a lot of litigation.
Right. I think people underestimate the satisfaction that especially an associate in a litigation role gets from finding something 7 levels down that is the key to the case.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen every day. It certainly doesn't happen even every year sometimes. But when it does happen, you're like, oh, this is why I'm doing this.
Yep. It's, I've been lucky enough to have one of the most fascinating cases I've ever worked on my plate for the last couple of years. Just got back from a deposition last night around midnight. But some of the documents in the case are just so fascinating that I'll never forget. Like you're just kind of mundanely hour after hour, like clicking through these documents and reading them, and you're starting to learn all these facts. And then just you happen to like click on that next one, and my heart started pounding. I was like, oh my God, what is this document? I was like trying to learn. My wife's like, what's going on with there? I'm like, Dad, like this document is insane. And so like, it's just like a treasure hunt. And so if you're somebody that's like curious and you like thrills and you care about things a lot, like litigation is fascinating. It's exciting. Like you'll never forget when you get that like really big win. And so I'm really, really enjoying it. I know that it's not forever. At some point they're going to pry the documents out of my hands. And I'm like, please don't take, but like, that's the function of as you just progress in your career.
So that's a conversation that you and I had on the phone a few months ago about, I remember asking you what you really liked. And you said, this is going to sound weird, but document review. And when I was a young associate, you would have not found anyone to say, I like document review, even if you find the magic document in there. And then we started talking about what you like about document review. So instead of repeating what you said to me, then I'll ask you to try and say, what is it about document review that you find not to be wearing a hair shirt the whole time at work?
So that changes over time, and you kind of get to appreciate the value that you can get from doc review. So essentially, and again, I have incredible mentors at the firm, and they constantly give me like little nuggets of wisdom. But one of the pieces I got from them was, I was junior on a case. We have big teams, so we have big cases, and I was like, I just don't know, like, what value I'm bringing here. Like, like everybody's weighing in during meetings, and I don't really know what to say. Like, and one of my mentors said, Petra, as somebody that masters the documents in a case, you become invaluable to the team. You become the person that the partners have to go to ask questions about. You become the person that weighs in on who to depose and what facts will become relevant to it. And that's when you're doing review of the other side's case, documents. Then you have the benefit that you can get from reviewing your client's documents, and that includes learning the relevant people, and that can change across cases. So if you're doing a like a deceptive advertising case, like knowing who is the key people in the marketing department is something that helps you weigh in on case strategy. That'll change if the case is now about insurance and you need to know who's in compliance. And so you just start to learn the relationships both within your client and then also in the opposing party. And you learn where weak points are potentially in the opposing party by, tension that might be existing. Like it's so fascinating about, what you get access to within people's emails. And you learn, how they're processing as a client. You learn how their departments work. There's so much value you can bring, both just from like institutional knowledge of your clients, but also learning how to kind of help steer case strategy. And that all comes from being somebody that has mastered the facts, like who are the relevant people? What are the relevant documents? Like, what are we going to rely upon to take this deposition? What are our, trial exhibits going to be? And that all comes all the way back to a big portion of it is the people that are reviewing the documents in the case.
I think the way you've described it, and I think the biggest difference between what you bring to it and are able to do and what was happening 35 years ago when I was doing it, maybe not quite 35, but pretty close, is the difference in technology. Because I remember you said to me at one point, I can be sitting on my couch scrolling through my iPad and find the documents and understand the connections. Mm-hmm. And when I was an associate, a 6-year associate, there was no such thing as iPads. You could scan documents, but it cost like $2 a page. So you really needed to know that you had to have that document scanned to do it. And so mostly document review ended up being, I remember spending 4 days in a windowless office in Birmingham, Alabama with 75 boxes and a dictaphone going an August 25th letter from Bob to Jim.
Oh, goodness.
And that was what document review was. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think when you have people say to you, oh, you don't want to do that anymore, it's horrible. They might be people from, my time where it was kind of horrible to do. And yeah, I knew all of the key documents of the case, but I don't think I figured it out while I was doing that. And while I was putting in the hours over and over, it was much later once you went back through your list of everything that you had intoned into the dictaphone for hours upon hours. So I think we need as lawyers to see that when the technology is changing, it may also change how, which parts are the fun parts and which parts are the important parts.
I'm still in the minority. I think even with people who are, at my level or age, I think some people, and there, a large part of it is, will be boring documents, but I think it just comes back to curiosity. I honestly have no idea how you all litigated cases back when it was paper. And I know it wasn't that long ago. I know that's the case, but like the functionality we have now is remarkable. I mean, I can narrow by a particular person and just look at everything they're on. So then I just know who this person is, on the other side. Or I can run searches. So if you get document dumped, I mean, I can't imagine being document dumped back in the day. Like they know they gave you a ton of irrelevant stuff and you can't even run like searches against it. But now I can be like, okay, well, we got document dumped. That's not ideal. It's whatever. But I can at least begin to tailor and whittle it down, and then I can start, issue tagging and like categorizing in a way that it sounds like you all had to do like, I don't know, piles or like paper tag. I don't know how you all categorize things.
I had 4 different colors of, Post-it notes.
Oh my goodness! What happens if it falls off and it loses its stickiness?
You hope to remember.
I'm sure having such a supportive community at Vorys helped too.
Yes.
Having people that give you meaning every day in life makes when you have a pile of things to go through a lot better. And resources, like you said, having influential people that you can rely on whenever you feel lost.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
It does. When the days are not always bright, and having like, okay, I'm doing it for the team of people I care about makes those days a little easier.
So how much client contact and corporate counsel contact did you have at the start, and how's that developed over time? And talk about, the relationships you build and how you build them.
So the people I work for are really good about intentionally including people from various levels so that there is always somebody that is accessible to the client. And I can't speak to other law firms. I don't know if that's the case. I know that, different, eat what you kill firms. Sometimes it makes it a little harder to be willing to have larger teams. And so Vorys is unique in that regard, in that, the teamwork is one of the core values. And so it allows, for teams to kind of work together. And because of that, at least people I work for have been very good about making sure that, and it's tailored to the appropriate level I'm at. And so, even if it's just being copied on emails, that helps the team and the case overall, because I stay informed without having to be, it being downloaded to me later. I need to know it regardless. But, if I get copied, then the client starts to know who I am. They start to see my name, somebody that they can trust. I stay informed on the case, and there's always, developments, and I don't need to be copied on every email. So like earlier on, it's grown over time, but it's always been methodical and in a way that ensures that the client has access to anybody who's on the team at any one time. But then I get to see how you communicate with the client, how you keep the client informed, the kinds of things that they like to be informed on, and the depth with which they like to be informed. And so I really like how I've been included, and that's probably how I'll carry it on myself as I move on. And then there's other than cases, there's tons of opportunity across, like, we'll host CLEs and the clients will get invited. We'll host events and the clients get invited. And so there's multiple touch points with the clients. It obviously has grown over time. So, it starts off with by being copied and introduced, then, potentially you go out to coffee if that makes sense. Then you'll be somebody who assists on depositions. And if you need to be like a second chair at that, then that's where you start to see the client when you're defending it. And so it's grown over time, as would be appropriate of the level of the attorney. Mm-hmm. So,
what do you think is, when you look at an in-house counsel and you say, that person's really good, what are they doing that impresses you? What are they doing that makes your job easier, that adds value to their client?
So let's see. Honestly, I think, I mean, as with any relationship, communication is key. And so, having discussions about what, client expectations, what they would like, what their preferences, like that's always helpful. I'm always going to welcome what the client is, how it best suits the needs of the company. And so, if there's a particular way that they like something or need something, for example, like if they regularly have to do a board update, knowing the schedule for that, so I can stay on top of making sure that there's certain key updates that they get that they can present at, or I've had clients that like to be really involved in the um, like ESI document collection and areas of that regard. And so it differs across all clients. I mean, we have a wide range, and I've been very lucky to work with a wide range. I think the ones that are just like with any, like I said, any relationship, open communication is going to be the most helpful, because then I'm able to be most helpful and they're able to get what they need.
You talked about working in teams. I assume that means you're working mostly on quite large cases that are extremely important to the client.
I have a range, so it's not all that, but yes, we have a lot of large cases, and those are more conducive to your larger teams. But even outside of those larger cases, just having access to people that will provide that mentorship is, so it's kind of, I would never hesitate to go to somebody and ask for something that would be helpful. But generally, yes, we have larger teams that would have a stagger across the years. So it'll be, a junior associate, maybe a senior associate if it makes sense, or it'll be just a mid-level associate and a junior partner, and then the senior partner who's more the client contact. They're always staffed efficiently, but it's helpful to have that kind of differences of perspective weigh in on any team.
Yeah. And as a supplement to the team's question, it might just be my hindered prefrontal lobe as a 22-year-old. Like, what do you mean by eat what you kill firms?
So, and I don't have any experience with this, and so maybe you can weigh in. I don't know what your firm was like, but so eat what you kill, as I understand it, is your compensation is based on what you bring in.
Okay.
And so, in those regards, it's you have to share out, as I understand it, percentages of what you. So, if you're going to bring in and have a large team, that person might want a cut of whatever the pay is, and so that lends itself to a more, I guess, competitive atmosphere.
I see. So, like being compensated for more sales, like a salesman, he sells more, he gets a bigger bonus.
Yeah.
Is that a similar analog?
Except we don't call it sales in the profession. We call it business development.
Yeah.
Business development.
He's accurate.
And, there are firms that are more like that and less like that. The thing is, when you're the client, so much of that doesn't really matter to you because
I see.
Occasionally you are given a law firm and said,
Yeah,
this is your law firm, you're dealing with them.
Preferred.
Right.
Yeah, for counsel.
But once you become the GC, you're like, no, that's not who I'm dealing with, because I want to work with this lawyer on this matter. Okay. Because I have either a prior relationship or I know that this person is the expert in this area. And it's very hard as corporate counsel to manage. You don't even try to manage whether they have an eat what you kill culture or a collaborative culture. You tend to see, when you've got big cases, that those firms that have a more collaborative culture provide better service.
I would like to say so, but that might be because I'm biased.
And then there are times when, as corporate counsel, you go, oh my God, why are there 11 people on this file?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where it comes down to whether or not it's being staffed efficiently. And I think we do a good job of that. But yeah, I mean, some cases, and the needs of the case will change over time. So you'll need to, sometimes when you have a massive document data set, you'll have to get through them pretty quickly.
Oh, I see.
And so you'll need to expand the team of, associates to kind of get through that, and then it'll kind of whittle down. So there's always like a core team, which we try and keep rather limited.
Okay.
But then you might have to expand and contract over time, depending on the needs of the case. Like trial, you might need to bring in some extra people to assist with trial. And yeah, but I agree with that.
So not that any of your clients have ever done anything annoying, but when they have, what kind of stuff as a senior associate in a big firm do you find not helpful when it comes from corporate counsel?
I mean, I have been rather fortunate. I'm trying to think if I can even come up with an instance.
So you've never run into the clients that do the on page 14, line 7, shouldn't there be a comma there?
No, but I have, but I would never fault them for that. I mean, they're entitled to the best work product. And if I disagree with it, we'll say, that this is why we did it this way. Probably not going to be over a comma, but, I would rather have a client that weighs in than a client that doesn't. And that allows us to make sure that, they're happy with whatever the work product is, that they are providing their expertise as somebody because generally and this may actually, I have to qualify my answer with, if you're working with a large corporation, you're generally working with lawyers in the corporation.
Okay.
And so that will totally change if you're working with a corporation that the client isn't an attorney. Mm-hmm. Because generally at the large corporations, you're working with groups of attorneys who went in-house. And I will always welcome their feedback because, I mean, they had the benefit of practicing law and then also going in-house and having the institutional knowledge of their client that I'll never have as much as I have learned the clients. That's just the function of them navigating that legal/business interest of the corporation. So you have to kind of tailor how you're approaching things. But even with the clients that aren't attorneys, they'll bring fresh eyes that can be really helpful to a case, where they provide a perspective that isn't. Sometimes when you get like stuck with a bunch of lawyers, like you forget how this is perceived, or you forget like what this actually looks like for the
have an established systematic approach, and new eyes points out something you haven't seen.
It also kind of helps you. It's refreshing sometimes, especially as a new associate, when you're explaining to somebody, because when you're at a large law firm, you're this like tiny little fish in a huge pond, and you're like, I don't know anything. And then you realize, okay, well, you're still an attorney. You graduated law school. Now you're practicing it at a law firm with people who are brilliant. But I think, I don't know if it was Professor Mangan or somebody had once said to me that, like, if you can't explain it to somebody else, like, then do you really know it? And so when you're having to explain, like, you'll get a client who says, like, how does this look? Like, what does this look like? Like, what are we in for? We just got sued. Like, what's discovery? Like, what's ESI? Like, how do we go about this? And just like, you become more confident because you realize that you can't explain litigation steps and procedure to them. And so you have to kind of keep that tailoring in mind if you work for larger clients, for smaller clients. But I would never fault somebody. I mean, like I said, like I don't know if that's a function of just like being an associate where you'll get red penned, by senior partners. So I'm like, the client's the client, whether it's as an associate, it's the partner oftentimes until it actually becomes the outside client. But I'll always take feedback.
So you and I are different in that way. I mean, my absolute favorite client was, I did a lot of work for an armored service company. I became their expert on phony gold, which is a thing. People put gold bars in a secure storage and then try and sell them multiple times. It's a great scam. And I worked with them a lot, and their GC always wanted to talk to me about the high level strategy, and never called me with, I think you could have said this a little bit different on page 5. Now, I think it was because he was so busy that he didn't have time. And when I became a GC, I found that I became further and further away. But the first GC I worked for, I was like, why aren't we commenting on this or that or the other? And he said, if we start making the small decisions, we have to make all of them. So let's keep ourselves to the big decisions. Let them make the small decisions, because that's what we hired them to do.
And that's fair. I can totally see that. And that is the function of outside counsel. That is their focus. They're the ones doing the litigation. They're doing it every day. They know the judges. They know the courts. And I guess where I fall is more where it lends itself to like factual development. So like if it's a huge brief or it's a need for different or parts of discovery, they know best. And so that's where I welcome that kind of feedback. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to fault you for sending me a different comma, but it doesn't bother me one way or another.
Yeah. Whether or not to use the Oxford comma is probably a whole different podcast that we won't be doing.
And I'm an Oxford comma girl, so.
Okay, well.
Are you not?
Uh-oh.
You know what? I'm so far past having to think about whether or not the Oxford comma goes there. I just haven't done that in quite some time to be the person that's deciding whether or not the Oxford comma goes in there. I'm reviewing something that's already been written. I will never take it out if you put it in there, but I may not notice if it's not there.
That's interesting. I think there's been whole cases litigated over whether or not a phrase changes because of the Oxford comma. So maybe that's litigator.
The First Circuit in 2017, but I was not doing that in 2017. So if you had to go back 10 years when you're first starting law school, I think that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself that you were really worried about at the time that you shouldn't have been?
That's a hard one.
You had it all figured out.
Because that's different. That's different from like, what would you have done differently? You asked, what would I have told myself not to worry about?
That you were concerned about coming in.
Man, I'd have to think about that. I don't think I mean, I'm a worrier, so I would say like that. Maybe that's where that comes.
Maybe you were just worried about everything.
Yeah. And so I'm like, but what is she? Yeah. I mean,
maybe the public service industry, maybe getting involved in that. Would you have not been worried so much if you knew what you know now?
I mean, I guess I would have like had less of a identity crisis. I suppose I would have been like, it's okay. It's going to work out. Mm-hmm. Don't worry so much about, feeling like you're betraying your values. But I mean, I think you go through life and you have those changes, and
that's true.
The different stages of life, you go through that, like the phase of like becoming an adult and, being independent, going to college. And then you hit like, I'm like 30 and, some people start families, some people don't, like that. I mean, so like, I just had chalk that up to just generally being like a maturing adult and, having a crossroads, because we all have crossroads. I'm trying to, I mean, like, I hate to say it, but like, I think grades do matter. Mm. And so I don't want to say that like, I would never tell myself to not worry about grades. I think it depends on what you want to do. And I'm very happy doing what I'm doing now. And I don't know if that would have been possible if I had not gotten good grades. And so I would never have told myself like, worry less about doing well in law school. So yeah, but I think would there have been things I did differently? Yes, that I can answer that question a bit more easily than I can would I have told myself not to worry about certain things.
Then I'll let you pick your own question.
I'm sorry.
What would have you done differently if you had it to do over?
I probably would have taken, if I'd known where I was going to be, I probably would have taken different classes. That were more geared towards I would have done a clerkship.
Okay.
That's my biggest regret, is going into litigation as a big law attorney. Even if it had been an externship where it's, the law school lets you do like a semester, I would have done not just that. I would have done a full clerkship.
I think for me, and I had the same regret a bit, but I also, when I look back on it, I was almost 30 years old. You probably were close to or about 30 years old. And I felt like, geez, I got to get started here. I can't.
Same.
I can't be taking a clerkship and still be in the learning phase, I got to get out there and, do this thing.
And for the record, Professor Salamini pulled me aside and was like, you need to do a clerkship. And I was like, nah. And so somebody needs to tell him that, like, he was right.
Okay, well, now I have to go downstairs and have a chat with him because I was his research assistant and he never told me to get a clerkship. So
yeah, he was like, you need to apply. And I was like, I just want to get my career started, like, and you're right. Like, it's, you're like, well, I just went to summer there. Like, I'm going to lose all those connections. Like, how am I going to I'll come into the firm and I'll be, years behind, whatever it is. I'm somebody who learns through experience and gains confidence through experience. And I would have benefited from that experience is what I'll say. But that's not for everybody.
Believe it or not, we are at 45 minutes. And I think I promised you that 45 minutes would be about it. Even with, and it's been more than that because we had the false start and I screwed up the tech. Ethan, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.